Holiday weekends are prime time for the campaign circuit, particularly one right after the party leaders' province-wide debate last week. Let's find out what the artificial intelligence known as Polly sees trending with. In the nation's capital, there's Erin Kelly, CEO of Advanced Symbolics Inc. Erin, I hope you had a good holiday weekend.
No, I got a big tree landed on my car, so it wasn't the most relaxing weekend,
No
actually. Ottawa
kidding.
was pretty
Wow.
hard.
I'm glad it only hit the car and not anybody in the family. That's the good news, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm not going to keep people in suspense anymore. Admittedly, we're still more than a week away from Election Day, but let's have the numbers. What's Polly saying about where things are at?
Well, it's a nail biter now in a sense. I mean, the PCs are still far ahead, but Doug Ford over the weekend slipped into minority territory for the first time, according to Polly. So he's at 62 seats. The Liberals are in second place with 31 seats, and the NDP in third place with 29 seats, and the Greens 1 seat still.
The Greens' Mike Schreiner to keep his seat.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. So no pickup at this juncture in Parry Sound Muskoka, which the Greens see as their number 2 seat potentially?
We're not seeing that right now. No, it's really 1 seat for the Greens.
Okay. Now 63 is a majority, and you've got Doug Ford at 62 right now. So I guess the obvious question is, how firm do you think that is?
Not firm at all. So we have about 20 ridings in the province where the difference between the first and second candidate is less than 2%. So, and engagement is low. So we do expect a low voter turnout in this election. So it really is, it's a nail biter. Like in one of the ridings in Ontario, just to give you an example, in the GTA, it's 0.1% difference between the two leading parties. So it definitely can go into majority territory within the margin of error. Doug Ford does have a very good chance of forming a majority government, but it's definitely not in the bag, as they say.
Okay, why don't you take us through, you said 18 ridings where the difference between number 1 and number 2 candidate is 2%. Why don't you take us through and you tell me how many there are, the ridings where it's 1% difference, like it's just so neck and neck, it's so close. Which ones are they?
Okay, sure. I'm just going to look. I've got Polly here,
sure.
So I'm going to look. So the riding in the GTA that is, or in the province that is the closest right now, as I mentioned, it's just gone up to 0.2%. This is live, so it was 0.1% when I looked earlier. Don Valley North, followed by Oshawa, Beaches, East York, Scarborough Centre, Essex, Burlington, Mississauga, East Cooksville. Those 7 ridings are all less than 1% difference. So if you're sitting on the fence, you're at home and you're wondering, does my vote matter? It matters. Get out there and vote, because your vote can definitely make a difference. And then we have the next one up there from there is Niagara Centre at 1.2%. So you can see this is very, very close election in many ridings.
And just to be clear, it's not always, say, PC or liberal PC. It might be in some cases liberal over New Democrat or New Democrat over liberal.
Absolutely. I mean, I can go through those as well, but I'm sure the people who live in those ridings probably have a sense of who's in the lead and who's in number 2 place, but we have them all kind of ranked, which ones are PC that are ahead by 0.2% and which ones are the NDP, that are just ahead and which ones are in second place. And in some cases, it's PC versus NDP. So, a very different vision.
Well,
for your writing.
Let me be completely arbitrary about this. And my pal who does the On Poly podcast with me, John Michael McGrath, he lives in Beaches, East York. So can you look up that one riding and see who's leading whom and by how much?
Beaches, East York, NDP is in first place, Liberals second place, and the difference is 0.2%.
Wow. Okay. That is tight. Can you tell at this juncture as well, Erin, I mean, it's obvious Ford's in first. Of the opposition parties, Liberals or New Democrats, has either one of them created any momentum to speak of at this point, to the point where they're the obvious challenger?
That's the problem in this election. It's really, normally in an election, it's an election about ideas, and the leaders are coming with platforms that really excite the population. And the challenge with this election is that the population, what is of concern to the population, affordability, inflation, the population doesn't feel that a premier of the province can really do much about these issues that concern them. Now, they are concerned about education, of course, and healthcare, but those are kind of longer term concerns and they're not really exciting people or driving them to get engaged. So this is really an election about people feeling we're going to be going through tumultuous times, possibly another recession, and who is the steady hand, the least risky person that can get us through these tumultuous times. And right now, people feel that Doug Ford has been steering the province through tumultuous times for, at least two and a half years now. So the feeling is, why rock the boat? Why put in somebody who doesn't have experience being a premier? That's basically what we're seeing. So that even when, and now Stephen Del Duca has had great momentum. His party had 7 seats, and now he's looking to form possibly the official opposition. So he's done a great job in getting people sort of excited about what he has to say. But at the end of the day, it's really not about that. It's about, we're nervous, we're scared. We definitely see that in the population, and we want somebody who's going to just steer us through a difficult time.
Again, people are going to be able to tell we didn't set any of this up ahead of time because, the numbers are changing as you look right now. I think it's pretty safe to say Doug Ford's going to win his riding. Andrea Horwath is going to win hers. You've just told us Mike Schreiner is likely to win his. Stephen Del Duca's is the big guess. Can you look right now and see where Vaughan Woodbridge is right now? Because it's in the 905, therefore you'd think the Conservative was in the lead, but he used to represent it, and so who knows? Maybe there's a bit of a sympathy vote for him there. What's it showing?
Ooh, he's in the lead, but 2.2% with the PCs in second place. So actually, that's pretty close for a leader of the party.
That's tight, but the Conservatives think they're going to win it, and they've got a cabinet minister there named Michael Tobolo who's hoping to hold it. So 2.2% Liberal lead at the moment with 9 days to go. Stay tuned, as they say. Okay, Erin, let me pivot here, as they also say, and ask you about an issue that I know has had a great deal, at least in my social media feeds, it's got a lot of traction, but I don't know if quote unquote real people actually give a damn about this. And that is the sort of Tories peekaboo campaign style. Doug Ford's not doing any one-on-one interviews anywhere. Most of his candidates don't show up for all candidates' debates in the riding. They're certainly not showing up on this program, providing Conservative candidates in which to participate in debates with other party nominated candidates. Can you tell whether there's any uptick on that issue on social media and whether people care?
There definitely is. We've definitely seen people say, this candidate did not show up in my riding. I sent this candidate emails and I didn't get a response. And it is annoying people. And I would say in those ridings where it's close, it might be enough to just push it in one direction or another. Now, in order to really evaluate the effect of that, of course, though, we'd have to do the counterfactual in statistics, which is if Doug Ford did allow his candidates to speak, what might they say? And that's a tricky one because we are seeing when you have low engagement, the people who come out to vote. Now, there's 2 types of voters. Conservatives tend to vote, so that favors Doug Ford. But angry people also tend to vote. And in an election where there's low voter turnout, some of the people who do come out are people who are upset. And we are definitely, one of the things we're seeing here, a really interesting indicator in this election is that women are 12%, the engagement of women is 12% higher than the engagement of men in this election. That's unusual. We don't usually see that kind of delta. It's where the men are kind of ho-hum, but the women are angry in some cases. And so in those ridings where things are close, if the candidate is not showing up and not going door to door and not being responsive, we are seeing that people are talking about it, and they're talking about it in those close ridings. So that actually could have an impact. And with the Conservatives being on the cusp of a majority government, that actually could cost them the difference between a majority and a minority. But we'll have to see how strongly people feel about that versus the fear they feel about the economy going forward, which does tend to favor Conservatives.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because I wonder whether all of the chat on social media I assume all the chat on social media I see complaining that Ford's candidates aren't showing up for all candidates' debates and that the Premier's running a peekaboo campaign. I assume that's all among people who wouldn't vote for him in the first place. Are you saying this is an issue that potentially could affect undecided voters and therefore hurt him?
Yes, I mean, the majority of it would be people who weren't going to vote for him in the first place, and they are putting through a lot of the traffic. But Polly is able to determine, because she's looking at the same people over the course of a year, she is able to determine which people are most likely Liberal and NDP supporters and which people are Conservative supporters. And Conservative people tend to have a lot of respect for the democratic process. That's why they vote regardless of how motivated they're feeling or how excited they're feeling about the election. And so when a candidate doesn't show up, it also tends to bother that type of voter more than it would perhaps sometimes a Liberal or an NDP supporter, or somebody who's got less of that strong conviction. So
Gotcha.
it's dangerous, but at the same time, because it's Doug Ford's election to lose, it also might be the right decision, because if one of his candidates were to say something, for example, on the abortion issue, whatever, with women being so engaged in this election, it could also be very detrimental. So it's hard to say which is worse at this point.
Let me follow up on that, because you mentioned in one of our prior conversations, might be 2 weeks ago already, that because of the leaked decision from the Supreme Court in the United States overturning Roe versus Wade, you were seeing a great deal of engagement on that issue in this election campaign among women who were nervous that because of the social conservative part of Ford's coalition, that could be an issue here. You still picking that up?
We're still picking that up. It hasn't ignited because there's been no gaffes. There's no reason to really believe that the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party that there's a risk that they will change abortion policy in Ontario. But it's definitely being discussed in social media, perhaps more so with the federal Conservative leadership race. We're definitely seeing high engagement there, but that trickles down into the Ontario election as well. But it's not as strong because there's been nothing that's really ignited it.
Right, and we should say for the record, Doug Ford has said the United States Supreme Court has zero jurisdiction over Ontario. There will be no changes on that issue here as long as he's the premier. So we put that on the record for what it's worth. Let me ask you about a video. Okay, this was something that happened before the leaders' debate, and none of us in particular who were inside this studio involved in the leaders' debate necessarily knew that it was happening at the same time right outside the studio, 50 meters away that way. But there was an incident, and there were a couple of demonstrators who got, well, I got to be careful what language I use here, but they either got beaten up or roughed up or, arrested rather vigorously by some security and or law enforcement at the time. A, has Polly picked that up? B, if she did, what did she find?
Yes, she picked it up. And what she found was two things. Number one, there wasn't a lot of engagement on this issue. The engagement that did take place was almost entirely Liberal and NDP supporters who were passing the video around, commenting on it, very, very upset about it. Only of the 3% of people who noticed the video, only a few, I think it was something like 2% who were against it, were progressive conservative voters. And of those, Polly determined that 8.6% of those were going to change their vote because of that video. So really a very, very small part, right? 2% of 3%, 8.6%. So it wasn't enough to change the seat counts. I would say the peekaboo effect is having more of an effect on the conservative vote than that video did.
Okay, we got about a minute and change to go here, Erin, so let me ask you one last thing. It's really unfortunate for the NDP and the Green campaigns that both of their leaders came down with COVID last week, and it's taken them off the hustings at a really inopportune time. Does Polly pick anything up about whether or not that's having an impact on their campaigns?
This is fascinating. Andrea Horwath's seat count went up when she got COVID, and it's because of COVID, not because of the leaders' debate. This was really interesting. We were surprised by this. So we went and looked into it. What happened when Andrea Horwath got COVID is the NDP party still had the gatherings. People were still going out into the communities. In some cases, Jagmeet Singh was showing up. So the people who like going to those events were still engaged, and they tend to be NDP supporters anyway. So the people came out. But the people who don't like going to those things were able to see Andrea Horwath online, apparently, and engage with the NDP party that way. She was giving interviews from her home, I guess it was. And we saw people talking about that. So people got actually more engaged with Andrea Horwath while she had COVID. And she was able to talk about how, she's feeling sick and the pandemic's not over. And she really got she got sympathy. And so it actually worked in her favor. With Mark Schreiner, it's hard to say whether it was the leaders' debate because he really rode high over that debate, but his popularity continues to grow, I think, off of that debate. So we have not seen that it has harmed either one of them. That getting COVID has really been something in fact, it's probably benefited Andrea Horwath.
Isn't that interesting? Maybe a sympathy vote there as well. She did do an event the other day, which they had to cut off short on Zoom because she had such a coughing fit and couldn't stop coughing. And you felt for her. She's trying her best to be out there and can't do it. Anyway, Erin, thanks so much for this. And holy smokes, getting interesting. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.